Pop quiz, nerds! How much video memory did Apple include in a Macintosh Color Classic 2? Can't remember? No big deal. I'll let you open book this one. Here's a link to Apple's support documentation website, which still hosts the spec sheets for every Mac they've ever made. Search for Color Classic 2 and there it is. Scroll down and there's VRAM. What do you know? It says 256K built-in and expandable to 512K. Congratulations, you've passed the test. Or have you? Follow-up question. What other machine uses the same logic board as the Color Classic 2? Ah, you there, in the back, yes. Did you say the Performa 550 and LC 550? That's correct! For extra credit, can you tell me the VRAM spec for the 550? 512K standard, expandable to 768K? You nailed it. I knew you were one of my best students. But something's not right here. I'll give you a moment to think about it.
Hold it!
Yes, your inner Phoenix Wright has found the contradiction. How can the Color Classic 2 and LC550 use the same logic board when they don't have the same amount of standard onboard VRAM? Their official spec sheets do look suspiciously similar. They both have a 33 MHz 68030 CPU, can accept up to 36 MB of RAM, and implement a full 32-bit data bus. People trust these spec lists as a source of truth. They've been in the Apple knowledge base for decades at this point. Wikipedia cites them, Apple history sites reference them, and databases like EveryMac rely on them. Did Apple really leave the extra VRAM off the logic boards for the Color Classic 2? Or have Apple's spec pages and service manuals been wrong for all these years? I'm not the only person who noticed this discrepancy, and I needed to know the truth. Here, in Userlandia, how much VRAM does a Color Classic 2 have anyway? If you guessed that a purchase sent me tumbling down this VRAM rabbit hole, you'd be right. At one of the 2025 MIT swap meets, I found a very filthy logic board for a color all-in-one Macintosh for sale by the Rhode Island Computer Museum. A quick inspection of the board revealed a 33 MHz 68030 hiding under the dust and grime, which is a telltale sign of a Macintosh LC550 board. But, to be safe, I googled the board number of 8200368A and gasped when the first result was Recap-A-Mac's guide to the Color Classic 2. Sure enough, this board looked exactly like the one on Bruce's site, with matching board numbers, ROMs, and half AA PRAM battery. I then searched for LC550 boards and found a board with ID number 8200595A. Now that photo looked more like the LC550 boards I remembered, which had a similar layout and a 4.5-volt alkaline battery pack. Could this really be a Color Classic 2 board? I thought I'd found a diamond in the rough, so I paid the $10 asking price and brought it home. After a rinse, scrub, dry down, and recap, I popped it in my Color Classic and it booted just fine. But a funny thing happened when I opened the monitor's control panel. I could choose thousands of colors instead of 256. Shouldn't a Color Classic 2 only have 256K of VRAM standard? I hadn't yet transferred the VRAM sim over from my old Color Classic board. This just raised further questions. Did I buy an LC550 board? Or was something else afoot? What exactly is a Color Classic 2 logic board? First, let's establish a baseline. Here's my Color Classic's original motherboard. There's two Mitsubishi M5M48228J 128K by 8 VRAM chips. Adding a 256K VRAM sim brings it up to 512K total. We can definitively say the original Color Classic has 256K of VRAM on board. Another example of an all-in-one color Mac logic board is the one from my Macintosh TV. There's 4 Mitsubishi M5M48228J 128K by 8 chips, adding up to 512K VRAM total. That also matches the Mac TV's spec sheet. Now here's my suspected Color Classic 2 board. I count 4 Mitsubishi M5M 442256AJ 256K by 4 dual-ported VRAM modules, which adds up to 512K of VRAM. Double-checking Recapa Mac's guide shows a board with 256K by 4 VRAM chips with matching Mitsubishi markings. Recapa Mac's guides are written by Bruce of Brankus Creations, and he's a pretty smart cookie who's refurbished his share of old Macs. He says on his Color Classic 2 page that he's recapped customer Color Classic 2 boards, and there's no doubt about it because he's done it live on stream. But a sample size of 1 isn't enough for me, so I searched for more examples of real Color Classic 2s. Colin from This Does Not Compute imported a Performa 275 from Japan, and that's just a Color Classic 2 with a different nameplate. Luckily, he recorded a video about it, and I scrubbed through it looking for logic board shots. His meticulous production detailed a board with all the same traits as mine. ID number 820036A, 4 VRAM chips, a half AA RAM battery, and matching ROM identifiers. Because this machine was imported from Japan, I think it's safe to say the logic board is a genuine match for the chassis. Here's another from Tom2 Drives, where he unboxes a Japanese Color Classic 2. Freeze-framing his logic board removal shows another board matching Colin's, Bruce's, and mine. Now we need to see what boards live inside the 550. Further research uncovered several logic boards matching the Color Classic 2. Here's a WorthPoint eBay listing archive for an LC550 board, and the photos show a board that matches the Color Classic 2. Same with Apple Rescue of Denver's listings for recapped logic boards. It's a common upgrade. Ardent Electronics' Color Classic features a logic board taken from an LC550. Bruce at Brankus repaired an LC550 Revision A board, which matches the Color Classic 2. Big Bad Biologist also recapped an LC550 with a board identical to a Color Classic 2. And all these LC550 boards have 4 VRAM chips, just like my board and the other Color Classic 2s. So an LC550 board is a Color Classic 2 board, right? The answer is yes, but it's complicated. You might remember my prior research showing an LC550 logic board with an alkaline battery pack photographed by Tinker Different user Fizzbin. These are the Revision B LC550 boards with ID number 820595A. And the only changes are a header to connect the alkaline battery and a Velcro pad to attach it to the board. But the use of an alkaline PRAM battery is no guarantee of a Rev B board, because there were Rev A boards with factory bodges to use alkaline batteries. You can see examples of alkaline Rev A boards at powercc.org or in a video by RetroTech2FX. All these board revisions are enough to make your head spin. Back in the early 90s, Apple churned out numerous model variants in an attempt to capture as much market share as possible. The all-in-one LC series was one victim of this scattershot approach. Apple's industrial design group flirted with designs for a big brother to the Color Classic called Mondo, featuring a larger display and a CD-ROM drive. But they were so repulsed by their creation that the model was banished to a dungeon beneath Mariani Drive. Yet, Mondo would live another day after John Scully requested a multimedia all-in-one with more screen space to sell to budget-conscious education and home users. Apple's product managers rediscovered the shelved design and put it in production as Hook. Apple's industrial designers weren't pleased. On the surface, the Hook machines shared the same ethos of simplicity as the Color Classic 2. Just plug in your keyboard and mouse and get to work, now with a bigger display and an optical drive. But underneath, they were suffering from Apple's growing sickness of complexity. Most Mac collectors are aware that the LC580 chassis isn't useful for restoring other Hook models, because Apple changed the logic board connector and the contour of the case to accommodate a cheaper Shadow Mask CRT. but most aren't aware of the 3 different chassis configurations for the LC520, 550, and 575s, depending on the types of optical and floppy drives. You'll be in for a rude surprise when switching a tray-loading CD-ROM drive and bezel into a caddy-loading LC520 chassis, because the connector positions won't match. This parade of models also produced many similar, yet different logic boards. It all started with the LC520 and a logic board with ID 8200368A. That's right, despite having a slower CPU, the LC520 logic board has the same ID as the faster LC550. Don't worry, there's other ways to tell them apart. I've seen 2 LC520 board variants. A version I'll call Rev A, with serial schema EZDY7 made in Singapore, and a later one labeled Rev D with schema DWDY7 made in Malaysia. I don't believe there's any differences between the 2 revisions, but without high-res photos to compare, I can't say for sure. The LC550 Rev A board looks to be exactly the same as the LC520 board, except it has a 33 MHz CPU and appropriately installed resistors to set the faster clock speed. Garth Beagle restored an LC520 for Marcintosh, and his board looks just like a Rev A LC550. The same goes for this new old stock Apple service kit for an LC520 logic board that was archived on WorthPoint. Another 520 board restored by KMac Vintage also looks identical to a 550. You can distinguish between an LC520 and 550 board by checking for a 33 MHz CPU marking and a DW1X9 serial number schema. Rev B LC550 boards also use the same serial format, despite having a different board ID. If you get an LC520 board, but want the speed of its faster siblings, you can overclock it by removing 3 resistors. Check out JDW's thread on Tinker Different for some interesting reading about that process and the discovery of leftover ROM programming resistors on the LC520. When Apple introduced specific logic board revisions for the 520 or 550 is a bit of a mystery. Apple launched the LC520 in June 1993, Performa 550 and Color Classic 2 in October, Performa 560 in January 1994, and LC550 in February 1994. You know what else launched in February 1994? The Performas 575, 6, and 8. Bringing in the rear is the LC575 in November of 1994. Oh yeah, and the Mac TV was in the mix there too. Fun. My best guess is that the introduction of the Rev B Performa/LC550 board happened soon after the launch of the Performa 575. Apple sold the LC and Performa versions of the 550 side by side with the 575 series until March 1995. I figure 550s with tray loading optical drives and build dates closer to 1995 are more likely to come with Rev B boards. This isn't a foolproof rule, because Apple shipped both styles of drives simultaneously, and both Rev A and Rev B boards have the same Apple Service Catalog part number. I found some examples on YouTube, like Camel Prod 666 pulling a Rev B board out of a tray load Performa 550. Matt's Workbench pulled a Rev A board out of his Caddy Load LC550. I'll grant that it's a small sample size, but I bet tray loaders are more likely to have Rev Bs. The key commonality tying all these different board revisions together are their system ROM chips. Every 520, 550, and Color Classic 2 board I found was equipped with high and low ROMs, marked 341-0534 and 341-0533, respectively. That renders the 520, 550, and Color Classic 2 identical from a software standpoint. Apple's System Gestalt identifier tells the different models apart by detecting CPU speed and video mode select lines. So if they're the same board, with the same service part number, why is there a difference in the spec sheet? Copy and paste sloppy, and waste. Given the evidence in front of me, I think it's safe to conclude there's no difference between a Color Classic 2 board and a LC550 board because they're one and the same. Apple didn't make logic boards with 256K of VRAM just for the Color Classic 2. Those Macs always came with 512K of onboard VRAM expandable to 768K. All the Apple spec sheets saying it came with 256K are wrong, and wrong. So if the logic board always had 512K of onboard VRAM, why would the spec sheet say otherwise? I suppose it's possible that Apple planned to make a board specifically for the Color Classic 2 with 256K of VRAM, but then changed course and forgot to update the specs. We already saw that they weren't above making new board variants for different CPUs or to change PRAM batteries. But I think that's unlikely, because the Color Classic 2 was a low-volume product for niche markets. It would be more cost-effective to make more Performa 550 boards, stuff them into otherwise unchanged Color Classic cases, and slap on a new badge. Perhaps I could find the origin of the error if I investigated the origins of the spec sheet. Maybe the VRAM spec was corrupted in a game of rewrite telephone. When Apple created their online knowledge base in the early aughts, they used their existing Apple Service Source Electronic Support library as a starting point. These CD-ROMs contained service manuals, technical documents, and a FileMaker specs database. Every Mac produced has an entry, and after browsing a few, the similarities to the online spec sheets stand out. Similarities like wording, table layouts, and notes, all signs that the web pages were ported from this database. And sure enough, the VRAM error is here too. This database was compiled in the late 90s, so it's possible it copied the error from other materials, like a service manual or tech note. Apple's service source manuals are handy guides for repairing and troubleshooting Apple products of the 90s, and should have all the relevant lists of parts and specs. Yet thumbing through the PDF service manual for the Color Classic 2 reveals numerous errors beyond the onboard VRAM. The CPU data bus width is wrongly listed at 16 bits, maximum memory is incorrectly specified as 10 megabytes, and the PDS slot is a few pins short at 96. Even the memory upgrade diagram is wrong, showing dual 30-pin SIM slots when the Color Classic 2 has a single 72-pin SIM. Another major misprint is in the sound section. The original Color Classic could only output mono sound even when using its headphone jack. It just duplicates the single sound channel into the left and right speakers. That's not the case for the Color Classic 2, where the speaker jack can output discrete left and right channels for true stereo sound. I validated this by checking the System 7 sound control panel, which shows mono sound for the original board and stereo sound for the Color Classic 2 board. Just to be safe, I plugged in a pair of headphones and played a stereo test file using Sound App. The result was true stereo sound with discrete left and right channels. Incidentally, this means that an internal stereo speaker mod won't work with an original Color Classic logic board. Modders intent on adding a second speaker must also perform a logic board upgrade. I have to hand it to the FileMaker database. It's a paragon of accuracy compared to this error-filled manual, because there's no mistakes except for the VRAM spec. But we're not done with the service manuals just yet. Much like the online spec pages are descendants of the FileMaker spec database, these PDFs are the children of another service product. You may be shocked, well, not that shocked, to learn that Apple created these PDF guides in 1995 to replace a HyperCard stack. That's right, the original Service Source was an interactive HyperCard application featuring service guides, repair manuals, and parts lists. Let's go back to the November 1993 Service Source CD-ROM. This is the first edition to feature the Color Classic 2, and browsing the stack triggered some serious déjà vu. It's like clicking through an interactive version of the PDF manual. The adjustment steps are written in the same format, the images are the same ones used in the PDF, and the slide layout is nearly identical. You know what else is in the stack? All the wrong specs. When Apple created the PDFs, they carried over all the mistakes from the HyperCard stack. It's all there in 1-bit black and white text. Now I've got a reasonable explanation for these errors. The Service Source team created the Color Classic 2 guide by duplicating the original Color Classic service guide and making some updates. They changed the model number and CPU speed, but forgot to update the other specs. These mistakes carried over when they created the PDF guides, and were all fixed except for VRAM when the FileMaker database was compiled. Why wasn't VRAM fixed at the same time? I guess I'll never know. It's not the first time mistakes were made in the history of documentation, and it definitely won't be the last. However, I need to mention that the service guide editors got one important detail correct. Opening the Color Classic 2's parts list in the HyperCard stack also matches the part number in the LC550 guide. No mistakes there. Oh, and one more thing. The original Color Classics PDF service manual has an interesting difference of its own. It lists the upgraded Color Classic 2/550 board part number instead of the original number of 6610733. This isn't a carryover mistake from the HyperCard stack, which lists the correct part number for an original Color Classic. Maybe Apple was just throwing LC550 boards at any Color Classic logic board replacement at that time? Who knows? Honestly, I'm not surprised that some goof-em-ups are lurking in service manuals and spec sheets, especially for the Color Classic 2 and Performa 275. Few people knew about these Macs, and fewer still handled them because Apple sold them in limited markets like Japan, Canada, and some Asian and European countries. It's a perfect opportunity to create miscommunications or misunderstandings. But let's say Apple got the spec right in the first place. What would have been the practical effect of 512K expandable to 768K VRAM in a Color Classic 2? Bit depth, resolutions, and RAMDACs. A curious consequence of Apple's spec sheet inaccuracy is that they undersold the Color Classic 2's video capabilities. 512K of standard VRAM means it can display thousands of colors out of the box. No upgrade necessary. But it still has a VRAM SIM slot. What happens if you installed a 256K VRAM SIM to bring it up to its maximum of 768K? That should be just enough video memory for 24-bit color at 512 by 384 resolution. But it's not available in the monitor's control panel. A Color Classic 2 or LC550 will never be able to display millions of colors, no matter how much video memory you stuff into the VRAM SIM socket. Why is that? The answer lies in the triumvirate of video generator, video memory, and digital-to-analog converter. You'll need a powerful video generator to push the pixels, a big pool of VRAM to store the larger bit values, and an appropriate DAC to blast rasters to the CRT phosphors. Needless to say that this was a costly proposition in the early days of Color Macs. True color boards were expensive and were usually bought by well-heeled workstation users or prepress departments. Less costly Macs for the masses couldn't afford to include huge pools of VRAM or complex graphics systems on their logic boards. Consider Apple's first Mac with onboard color graphics, the Macintosh 2CI. Although the 2CI has a Brooktree 478 VDAC capable of true color output and 32-bit quick draw and ROM, its RAM-based video system is limited to 8-bit color. RAM-based video in the 2CI and 2SI uses up to 320K from System RAM Bank A for video memory, which is enough for a 256-color 640 by 480 display. Users unhappy with the limitations of RAM-based video were free to open their wallets and wave a wad of bills at Apple or one of the many third parties selling new bus graphics cards with support for higher resolution and color depth. Macintosh onboard video got an upgrade with the Mac LC and its V8 ASIC. When combined with 512K of VRAM, the V8 can display thousands of colors on its matching 12-inch RGB display. Pretty impressive for the cheapest color Mac. It's made possible thanks to a neat trick of 32-bit color quick draw. You see, Macs can draw color graphics in one of two models, index or direct. Index color maps the application's RGB values to a palette of colors in a color lookup table. Developers can create palettes of up to 256 colors from a pool of 16.7 million to optimize the color display for their application's needs. This was fine for early Macintosh 2 models, but users yearned for more colors. Third-party graphics cards hacked in support for 24-bit true color, but it was no substitute for native QuickDraw true color support. Apple solved that problem with the introduction of 32-bit QuickDraw in its Direct Color mode. Direct Color directly translates an application's RGB colors into a 32-bit device pixel format consisting of 4 8-bit channels. There's 1 byte each for red, green, and blue, along with an unused high-order byte, possibly reserved for a future alpha channel. Directly addressing pixel color avoids all the jiggery-pokery of juggling palettes, but there's a trade-off. 32-bit direct color mode requires significantly more video memory than index color mode, 4 times more to be precise. Displaying 256 colors at 640 by 480 needs 300K of VRAM, while Millions needs 1200K. There's no way Apple would put that much VRAM in a cheap consumer Mac at the time, so they needed to cut memory usage while improving color depth. The solution was adding a 16-bit color mode to Direct Color. 16 bits is half of 32 bits, and thus requires half the video memory. In the case of the Macintosh LC, a 16-bit 512 by 384 frame for the 12-inch RGB monitor requires 384K of VRAM, and that fits right into the LC's maximum of 512K of VRAM. QuickDraw generates 16-bit pixels by taking the 5 most significant bits of each RGB channel and cutting the 8 unused high-order bits down to 1. It's really 15-bit color encoded into a 16-bit value. The advantage is that applications don't need to make any changes to support this mode. They're internally working at the highest possible fidelity, and QuickDraw handles the bit depth conversion. The disadvantage is that it leaves potential colors on the table. Full 16-bit color often uses the leftover bit as an extra green value to generate 65,000 colors instead of Apple's 32,000. But the downside there is encoding complexity and the possibility of green casts in neutral tones. Apple chose consistency and speed over more potential colors. The last member of the triumvirate is the RAMDAC. At some point, Apple decided to produce their DACs in-house, starting with the Ariel and the Macintosh LC. After researching the chip, it's safe to say that Ariel operates similarly to Brooktree RAMDACs, but how Apple achieved that isn't clear to me. Did they license IP from Brooktree, commission Brooktree to design a chip, or develop their own Brooktree-compatible design? Maybe someone will find the design document someday and illuminate me. 3 versions of Ariel can be found in various Macs. The original LC's 344 S105 gave way to the 344 S1069A, found in the LC2, Performa 600, 2VI, and 2VX, DuoDock, LC3, Color Classic, and LC520. You'll find the 344 S1069B variant in the Macintosh TV, LC550, and the Color Classic 2. The S1069 chip has a faster dot clock than the S1045 version, which allows it to support higher resolution displays, but I can't tell you what's different between the A and B revisions. Ariel is listed in several tech notes as supporting only 16-bit color, not 24-bit true color. That limitation, combined with the ASIC, means you can't display true color, even if you swap the DAC. Taking all 3 factors into play, the limiting one is video generation. A LC3 with 768K of VRAM has enough space for a 32-bit 512 by 384 frame buffer, but it doesn't matter because the Sonora chip can't generate true color graphics. That amount of VRAM does open up an 832 by 624 resolution, though. The 520 and 550 are fixed to 640 by 480, and their Ardbeg ASIC needs the expanded 768K VRAM to display thousands of colors. A Color Classic 2 also has a fixed resolution of 512 by 384, and like the LC3, is limited by its ASIC and can't display true color at that resolution even if equipped with 768K of VRAM. So that's it. There's no reason to upgrade its VRAM to 768K. Or is there? All the cheeky kids in the back of the class are ready to remind me that there is a way to force a Color Classic to leverage that extra VRAM. Hot rod it to display 640 by 480. Resolution mods are a time-honored tradition amongst Color Classic owners, usually done in tandem with a Mystic 040 upgrade. But the mod works just as well with a board from an LC 520 or 550. After modifying your machine and installing a 256K VRAM sim into your upgraded board, your Color Classic can display thousands of colors at 640/480 just like an LC 500 series driving its native monitor. Opening up about this Macintosh will even declare your machine to be an LC 520 or 550, complete with a hook chassis icon as shown in JDW's upgraded Mac. Remember what I said earlier about the RAMs being identical and the Gestalt identifier operating on CPU speed and monitor sense lines? There you go. As the meme says, they're the same board. Now, if you excuse me, class is dismissed. I need to call somebody at Apple who can update this spec sheet. I hear John Turnus is a hardware guy. Oh, P.S. If you made it this far, I had a bunch of stuff on the cutting room floor about the history of true color graphics on the Mac. I'll probably dust off the old chips and bits format and make a short video about it. Otherwise, if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. Also, if you'd like early access and bonus bits, please check out my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time here in Userlandia.